Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Nate Pike. Oh, we've got us a conversation today. I'm excited. I was excited for this one uh, from the moment that we were able to get it set up. And then I got more excited as we had our little pre-interview conversation because there's some other things that came out that, are some. It's going to be a good one, kids. Um, we did a live show in Edmonton a little while ago, and we had a bunch of panelists on. And one of the panelists we had on is the director of an organization called Public Interest Alberta, and he was very funny. And I really enjoyed the conversation that I had on the panel. And I wanted to talk more about Public Interest Alberta because of some of the things that happened during the live show. So I'm very excited to welcome to the program Brad Lefortune.
Hey,
Bad joke, but
how's
it
it
works.
going?
I'm good. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great today. I've been looking forward to this for the last couple of weeks since we did the show in Edmonton. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I really, really, for anybody who hasn't gone like watched that live or listened to the live episode, there was, I mean, there was so much good insight that was provided by the panel, and especially you, sir. That it's really it is worth making sure that you go and listen to it. And here's the thing. I'm going to do the little plug, and then we'll get right into the conversation because there was the whole thing that got me excited about having this conversation was at one point during the Q&A, the audio which unfortunately did not survive because it turns out there's only so much data that you could fit on a USB stick, and 4.5 hours of audio ain't it. But at one point during the Q&A, there was somebody from more rural Alberta who was talking about community and talking about the desire for a sense of community. And you spoke to that person about uh, your organization and some things that could be done to build that community. So that was what I was like, oh, we could
Yep.
make a meal out of this. And then you gave me this big thing that I've circled here on my piece of paper in front of me. We're going to get to as well. But
Yep.
before we get to all of that, let's start with the broad question. Nothing to do with Public Interest Alberta. Nothing to do with the other things. Who is Brad Lefortune?
Ooh, that is the toughest question. Let me give some broad strokes. I'm a dad first and foremost. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Treaty 6 territory, and I was born in Edmonton, but my dad moved us out to Saskatoon in '86. Moved out of Alberta like a lot of Albertan families at the time. Grew up in Saskatoon, moved back for school to Edmonton to go to Grant MacEwan and then University of Alberta. Been back in Alberta for over 20 years now. So I consider myself to be, like I said, my number one full-time job is being a dad. I have a beautiful 8-year-old daughter who's starting grade 3 today. And I love this province. I'm an advocate, I'm an activist, and I'm someone who really likes to do politics. I think that advocacy is for everyone, and I'm lucky enough to do that for a living. So that's a bit about who I am. Yeah, off the top.
I mean, I want to talk about the Grant MacEwan thing because there's one little tidbit I had no idea about that you threw out during the live show. And so, like, when you went, what did you study in school? I'll hedge it a bit.
Yeah, well, I remember, so I studied theater arts at Grant MacEwan in the Orange Building before they moved downtown. And it was a 2-year theater diploma program where I got to sing, dance, and act for 2 years. And yeah, I remember telling my dad I was going to go to theater school, and he's really supportive in general of everything I wanted to do. But he's like, "Are you really sure about that?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And Grant MacEwan was the best theater arts program, west of Toronto, and still is. It was a great place to go to school. I learned a ton, met a ton of amazing people who are still doing, not only fringe shows and dinner theater, but like playing at the Citadel and touring around. And so it was really high quality. I loved it. But it's not an easy profession. Kudos to everyone out there who's making it work as an actor. But I kind of moved on to other things. But really was formative for me, and I loved my time at the Orange Hub. It was amazing. Yeah,
Super nice facility. Um, so next question from there. How
yeah.
did you go from theater work or an education in theater
Yeah.
to, I mean, there tends to be in the arts, we've seen a little bit of it this week from a certain Canadian writer. There is a tendency for the arts to push back on the politics and social issues of the day. It tends to be a bit of a mirror that gets held up. But how did you go from like a theater arts to the role that you're in now with Public Interest Alberta?
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty like long and winding road, and I think that for me, I'm someone that always just kind of like looks maybe the next 5 steps in front of me. I love doing theater so much. And what I loved about doing theater is that you got to be and try to do something different every single time you were in a show. So, you could be playing Shakespeare one week and then, Titanic the next. And it was really creative and liberating, right? You got to do a different thing all the time. So I love doing that. Um, I always always loved, in addition to, getting ready for a show, the academic side of things too. So we would sit down and talk about literature and plays a lot as well in that program. And I decided I wanted to study stories and literature and political science, just kind of as a natural extension of that a little bit, but always with a strain of like, okay, how do the stories that we tell, whether it's through theater or literature, also, shout out to that Margaret Atwood piece. That was amazing. If you haven't read it, check it out. It's so powerful. But that stories shape our understanding of obviously of who we are, and how we engage in the challenging moments that we're facing. And so I think that it wasn't so much that I wanted to be an actor and be on stage, although I loved that. It was pretty good for my ego at the time when I was in my 20s. But more than that, I think what I loved about theater is that it was a way for people to connect with the world around them and to shape the way that we understand things and to really ask the tough questions about who we are and where we're going and how we relate to one another. So always pretty like political, not heavy, but like serious in that sense about it. And then I found that like just exploring the history of literature was something I was really interested in. And it just kind of shot off, and like, okay, now we can start talking about history, and we can start talking about like, stories from real people and, what they're doing in their community to try to change it. And make it better. So it was always kind of like just about people, I think, for me. I ended up going back to the U of A, took my sweet time. I was studying political science and cultural studies and English literature, all of those big bad, disciplines that get people to think creatively and critically, which has really informed the way that I approach my work, and has given me those kind of like soft skills of writing and sharing stories and working with people that are just so essential to doing any kind of like political work. Yeah.
How did that get you to Public Interest Alberta though?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Specifically, public interest Alberta.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, here's what happens. When you work in government and you work for not the Conservatives. I was working for Rachel Notley for 4 years. And I got to do some really cool stuff. Like, I won't go into the details of the legislative changes, but every single piece of labor legislation was left untouched by the Notley government. And I was lucky enough to be there working on that and supporting my boss, my minister, Christina Gray, every step of the way. And it was an incredible experience. Okay, and then the election happened, the NDP lost, and we were all fired on the spot. Not just the politicians, but everyone who worked for them, right? So I found myself unemployed in 2019. I worked for an advertising company doing some creative sort of agency work on campaigns for nonprofits and unions. It wasn't the perfect fit for me. I wasn't really a business guy. I didn't love doing the sales and the biz dev kind of hustle. And at Public Interest Alberta, there was an opening for a new executive director. I threw my name in the hat, was lucky enough to get the job. And the reason why I wanted to do it, how I decided to even put my hat in the ring was I did the partisan thing, and I learned a ton about how ideas become, policy and legislation and how to work with stakeholders. And I really, really loved it. But I believe in advocacy in between elections. I think it's so important. And I think our democratic engagement in Alberta isn't what it could be. And I wanted to work on that. And so this opportunity kind of just came. A friend called me up and was like, "Hey, you should apply for this." And I thought, I don't know if I want to like lead up a small organization that's, putting a target on its back every day with the UCP. But then I thought about it and I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. So, it's been fun. I've been there for over 4 years now. And, we're small, but I'd say we punch above our weight. We only have 3 staff, but we have hundreds of members across the province. And the mood is really shifting. There's still a lot of fear, frustration, and exhaustion, quite frankly, in the advocacy community, as and you talk about, Nate. But also, I think that there's something building. It's not new, but it's becoming a little bit more palatable, I think, or tangible, which is like a growing confidence that this UCP kind of monolith isn't unshakable. And you see Thomas Lukazik working on his thing with Forever Canada, your podcast and like your whole project, right? Corrupt Care, all of this stuff I think is coming together and it's showing that I think change is possible. And I'm really, really hopeful for the future in a way that, I don't think a lot of people have been for a while. I'm really feeling that. And so it feels like a perfect time, I think now more than ever, to get involved with advocacy. And so we got a lot of wind in our sails, and I'm super excited about where things are headed. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I get to talk to people every single day about their hopes and dreams and fears as well about the way things are going and how we can take that energy and work together for something better. There's more democratic and that includes everybody. So it's a really awesome place. I'm really lucky to be doing what I'm doing for sure.
Oh, you gave me so much to work with there, sir. Um, eh, yeah, I love what you're talking about in regards to the tipping point that's kind of being hit
Mm.
because I'm seeing it as well in a lot of unexpected ways. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and for the record, we're recording this on September 2nd. But I had a conversation with somebody yesterday where they had no idea what I do outside of. They didn't know that I do this because
Mm.
I'm not like somebody who I wear this shirt. I don't wear this out in public. Because that's just it feels crass. But they were like, "Oh, so what do you do with your spare time?" And I was like, well, I dabble in provincial politics a little. And they were like, "Oh yeah, I try, I try to follow, but it's just it's so hard to say interested because there's nothing really going on." And I was like, "Let me tell you about the last week." Uh, but by the end of the conversation, like I listed off two or three mind-blowing things.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, well, let's start with Margaret Atwood. Do you know who that is? Oh, yeah, she wrote A Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, Alberta's on her shit list right now. Let me tell you why. Um, and by the end of the conversation, they were like, I had no idea. I need to be paying much closer attention. And I think that there is this product of living in a somewhat stable democracy where there is oh, we're okay. I don't have to, we've got these people that are doing the things. I can take my hands off the steering wheel. And I think that what we saw coming out of the pandemic was a bunch of people go, I'm going to be loud and angry because I can't go to Boston Pizza. Um, and there's now the reciprocal is starting to play out where there's a lot of people, and I think we see this with Lukasik's Forever Canadian. There's a lot of people who are like, no, I'm we got to start doing the work of civics
Mhm.
again, which I think is really really exciting. I want you to talk about what Public Interest Alberta does. So, like, it's a thing. that does
Stuff. Lots of stuff. We do. Okay. So Public Interest Alberta does advocacy. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means and we'll go into it. Um, it is an organization that was founded to be a counterbalance to the forces on the right, if you want to go with that kind of spectrum analogy of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the Fraser Institute. And for, I'm assuming people who are tuned into this know those organizations for better and for mostly worse. But they're organizations that receive a lot of money from vested interests to promote ideas of privatization, cuts to public services, and the sort of, continuation of, Reaganomics and Thatcherism that started in the 70s. And about 20 years ago, some very visionary people, including a gentleman named Noel Somerville, who actually just passed on in the last couple of weeks, who was really, really integral to founding the organization. Um, got together and said, okay, well, where's our space? And so, what you're saying about that space and just giving people an opportunity to feel like they're connected to something is like the first and most important step. So, PIA kind of was a response to the fact that we didn't have an outlet beyond political parties for that alternative, to focus on public services, public institutions, and public spaces. And so what do? We do issue-based campaigns. Right now, we are very focused on saving the Canada Pension Plan. We're also very focused on telling the government that they need to get rid of this ADAP program that is meant to replace AISH and displace AISH recipients from, a secure and reliable income. We're also very focused on democracy right now, and trying to mobilize people to get engaged in the municipal program process, right? So we heard so much about Take Back Alberta in the last 5 years. I always say that, you and me and everybody else out there need to take Alberta back from Take Back Alberta. So we've had campaign schools for potential school board candidates and their teams to learn about the brass tacks of what it means to run for office and how you do that, how you develop your lit, how you go door knocking, how you do data collection. Um, and it's been really successful. So we do a lot of issue campaigns. We do training for advocates, potential candidates, and we do a lot of public awareness and education as well. So we released an annual child poverty report that came out a month ago. What else do we do? Right now, we're focused on planning for our annual conference, which is coming up in April. We get hundreds of people together in a room to hear from people like Nate Pike. You were a guest at our last conference, which is fantastic. And people from around the province and beyond who talk about civic engagement and public advocacy and what it means. Because sometimes, yeah, you're right. I mean, I always hear it all the time. They're like, well, like I'm doom scrolling. I might hit repost on whatever social media platform I'm on. I sometimes do the form letter and send it off to the premier's office, but I know they're getting 1,000 of those a day and they just delete them. What can I really do? And I think that more and more post-pandemic, under this government, it comes down to community organizing, in person, having conversations and saying, hey, what's going on in your community? How can we help? And so we try to do a lot of that. We do lobby training, we do campaign training. We give people an opportunity to learn from other advocates who have been successful in their issue-based campaigning. And we bring a lot of disparate voices together. We're not partisan. That's very, very important to us. We're nonpartisan. So it is a bit of a clearinghouse or convening space to talk about issues that affect all of us, from early learning and childcare all the way to seniors care. So we have 7 priority areas and we have task forces on each one. So I would say it comes down to education and awareness, issue campaigns, training, and then generally just a community of people who are like-minded and really support one another across the province in fighting back and resisting this democratic backsliding and attack on our rights and our public services and institutions. There's a lot of community there. There's kind of like the softer stuff, but I think that it's actually absolutely the most essential piece of what we do. at Public Interest Alberta because let's be honest, it can feel pretty alienating doing what we do, talking to a screen, every day, getting out there and, yelling at the legislature with, 50 of your closest friends every week. But what we find is that there's a lot of folks out there, not just in Edmonton, not just in Calgary, who are looking for outlets and ways to organize to resist what the UCP government is doing and also to build an alternative because that's what it's really about. Like Alberta can be so much better than what it is today. We can afford nice things and we can support vulnerable students and build a world-class public education system like we had before the UCP started cutting it, and so on and so forth. So, um, we do a lot of things, but we really focus on the education and advocacy side of things first and foremost. Yeah.
Again, you gave me so much to unpack there.
Thank
But I mean, I think the community piece is really, really important because, going back to that whole, I don't want to use the word complacency
Yeah.
because that has almost a negative implication to it that I don't know is appropriate. Um, and I think that there has been, there's been a period where things haven't been. I mean, I don't remember. I've lived in this province my entire life, with the exception of a very short period, and I don't remember book bans ever coming up before. Like I just don't remember it, and so I think that there is a product of living in a semi-stable state for a while is oh, okay. Things are going well. I don't have to really get engaged. And if you aren't really getting engaged, then the tools and the mechanisms by which you get engaged start to become increasingly foreign. And so when we find ourselves in this week where Margaret Atwood is calling out the Premier of Alberta for banning books, among other things, and all of the other things that are going on. People are going, whoa, 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 whoa. What is happening here? What do I do? What do I do about all of this? And that's where I think the education piece that Public Interest Alberta is endeavoring to provide is so interesting because you're not when you talk about the Fraser Institute. I mean, I talked about them on Sunday. Um, and I was like, even the Fraser Institute says that we're funding education and teachers the worst in Canada. Like
Right?
when these guys are like, oh yeah, no, we're sucking. That's not nothing. And I mean, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. One of the things that I've always wondered about is on the right, it seems like you can, and I like to use the word profitize, uh,
Mm,
lots of things. So if you want to be, I don't know, build a coal mine or something, it's pretty easy to find a right-wing advocacy group that will be like, yes, I will take your money and we will talk about how coal is so good. I bathe in coal every single night before bed. Love the coal. And they can make a lot of money doing that. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of money to be made in progressive causes because you're like, hey, don't do that. And then that's
right.
the end. So there's not like a $6 million, $6 billion mine at the end of don't do that. It's just don't do that. So how does Public Interest Alberta get its funding? Can you talk about that just for like the
Yeah.
transparency's sake?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. We definitely don't have yeah, we don't have big funders, as you said, but we get our funding from individual Albertans. We have a membership structure where we do $20 for low income Albertans, no questions asked. You don't have to prove what you're earning in a year. The membership for individuals otherwise is $50 per year, but that accounts for, a portion of what we get. The other sustaining funding, as we call it, comes from organizations like CUPE Alberta. So unions that support public education and represent the support staff. Um, the United Nurses of Alberta as well. Health Sciences Association supports us as well. So there's public sector unions. We also have not-for-profit organizations. Um, across the province, including we partner with, End Poverty Edmonton, Momentum in Calgary, and then Voices for Albertans with Disabilities, the Disability Action Hall. And um, we have a relationship where Public Interest Alberta is basically wanting to keep the lights on. Okay. We're not for profit. We are registered under the Societies Act as a nonprofit organization, which is Alberta's legislation, where you say, hey, we're not for profit. We have a board and we have bylaws. Here are our processes. So, what we do with organizations when they want to become members is we say, hey, what would it mean to you to become a member? What are you looking for and what can you contribute? If it's $0, that's great. Become a member anyway and join us. If you can contribute more, that's great too. We want to keep the lights on. But yeah, to answer your question, for transparency's sake, we're supported by not-for-profits, public sector unions, private sector unions, individuals across the province. We have, hundreds of members, but that's, $50 a year or $20 a year. Um, Again, super small organization. We have 3 staff. We're governed by a board of 16 individuals from across the province. And then we have task forces, which is kind of really the engine of PIA. We have 7 task forces. Those are our committees that are focused on specific issue areas: early learning and childhood, environment, human services and poverty, seniors, education, post-secondary education. I'm probably missing a couple, democracy. And that's where we have like anywhere from like 5 to 25 people on these task forces. And they develop the campaigns and their priorities for the year. And then they go out and do the advocacy that you see. So that's a bit about the structure and the funding piece as well. Yeah.
Okay. Obvious question that I have to ask because I know that there's going to
Yeah.
be people who are like, "Oh, he
Oh,
just
yeah.
said he's funded by the unions." He did. Um,
Yep.
the does Public in Interest Alberta take any direction from its funders?
No, no. We have a governing board which is represented by 16 individuals. Some of them are also union members, and they sit on the board. They govern Public Interest Alberta, but we don't take insider plays from organizations that fund us. We partner with those organizations. We have our strategic plan that guides our priorities, our vision and our mission, and our plan about how to execute that. And what we're about, our 3 pillars are like adequately reflect the diversity of Alberta, and we mean diversity when we say diversity, to build our power in the public and through the media to get our message across about saving public institutions and public services. And then the last one is to build our legitimacy as well. And so we work with organizations like the Parkland Institute, and Poverty Edmonton, I mentioned as well, and other organizations that have a really strong history and rigorous, processes and good research to put out evidence-based advocacy and policy that will stand up to scrutiny. Now, of course, people do say, like, I think it was the health minister's chief of staff a few months ago when we were down in Red Deer was like, "Oh, this is a guy who used to work for the government, the NDP government." Yeah, that's great. You can Google. Sure, I used to work there, right? But just because you work for a political party or you otherwise engage in a political party doesn't mean that you are partisan or not thinking objectively about the damage that's being done by this UCP government. We're nonpartisan. We don't take plays from our funders. We're very democratic. Anyone can come to our AGM. It's coming up on the 24th of September. If you're a member of the organization and you've paid your membership before that day, you can come and join our board and tell me what to do. You'll be my boss. So yeah, we're very transparent that way.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to get that out of the way because I knew that as soon as you said the union support, there were going to be some folks, maybe press secretaries, I don't know, who would immediately, oh, I see they're funded by the unions there,
Yeah.
and let's just square that out of the way. You listed
Well,
off a lot of things. There's one thing I want to focus on before we kind of move on in the conversation because I do want to talk about the community outreach part,
yeah.
especially to rural Alberta, because one of the things that I personally don't like, to be eloquent, is I was born in I was born in Edmonton, but I was raised in rural Alberta. I lived in northern Alberta and rural Alberta for most of my formative years. And the schism that exists between rural and urban Alberta is unbelievably heartbreaking to me. And I see and I know because I lived there. There, yes, you've got like the people who are like, oh, we should set up a clan chapter. But you've also got a lot of people who aren't of that ilk, and I think those are the ones who, not being in the urban centers, are the ones who are most looking for like, oh, fuck, what do I do? Pardon my language. So
Yeah.
I want to get into that, but
Yeah.
before we do, I want to talk about one of the topics that you listed off there because I think it's really, really important.
Mhm.
Um, the AISH ADAP stuff.
Yep.
Um, that is, I'm going to use the word diabolical. A move by the provincial government, and I love the way that you framed it in that it's a way to shed some of the people who are on AISH currently and move them over to this new program. So it's a topic. I mean, this is one of the challenges is like in any given week in Alberta, there's like five, wait, what? And it's not just like, wait, what? It's like fully
I
loud,
know.
wait, what? Even just using last week as an example, like the Cyril Turton thing with the hate preacher, the minister letting the hate preacher into the legislature, like that is a bonker statement, followed by the book bans, followed by the teacher strike, followed by the she actually wore the blue dress. Are you kidding me? Like there's so much there's so much that happens that it's very, very easy for some of these issues to fall through the cracks. And unfortunately, the issues that tend to fall through the cracks, the first tend to be the ones that affect the most vulnerable. So
Yep.
if you can just for a few minutes, what
Yep.
is the H ADAP transition
Okay.
and why is it bad? If it's
Yeah.
bad, it's
Yeah.
bad.
Thanks, Nate. I mean, thank you for like pausing and dwelling on this. And for full transparency, again, like we've heard from, we at Public Interest Alberta have heard from some of our members and supporters who have called us in and said, hey, like in the last couple of months, appreciate what you're doing on everything. We know it's whack-a-mole. But like, this program that is being brought online to replace AISH or at least temporarily replace AISH so they can like, reapply or whatever it's going to be. We'll talk about the details, is something that has fallen by the wayside for a lot of people. And I know that you talk a lot about ableism. I think that's an expression of ableism, right? Like sometimes if it doesn't affect us personally, it's hard for us, even if we care and even if we do our homework, to really understand the impacts of these kinds of changes. So, what we're talking about is Jason Nixon came along several months ago and said, you know what? And this is these are basically his words, okay? He said, you know what? AISH is punitive. It doesn't allow people who want to go to work because it gets clawed back if you go to work. And AISH is a long-standing program in Alberta. I think it's, from what I understand, and I'm relaying what I hear from community, is that it's not perfect and it's far from it, and it needs to be reformed in a very careful way with direct input from people who are on AISH. Okay, first and foremost, it's assured income for the severely handicapped. Okay, that's what they call it. We call it AISH, and it means that people who are unable to work or who have significant barriers to work and to earning an income will have an assured income every single month that comes in and is meant to make sure they can make ends meet. It's not nearly enough as it is. And it's subject to clawbacks if people do earn an income, right? And also, the threshold for a lot of years was falling behind the cost of living increases in the province. Okay, so that's Aish as it was. Jason Nixon comes in and says, "You know what? We want people to be able to work. I really believe in work, and I'm hearing from people who just want to be able to work, and Aish isn't letting them work. So we're going to have a new program called ADAP. I can't even remember the full acronym. Nate, I don't know if you got it at your fingertips there, but anyway, it's a new program that will, according to Jason Nixon, provide an assured income, and also allow Albertans to work more hours and therefore earn more overall income every month so that they can afford, you know, their rent, their groceries, etc., the cost of living. Sounds good in theory, doesn't it? But in practice, what is happening is there is so much chaos happening right now. And what they're saying is that individuals will have to apply for ADAP. Then they will go through a process where they have to prove that they cannot work. Okay. And we're still figuring out what the details mean, but it sounds and looks like people will have to go to doctors that are approved by the UCP, and pay for those assessments themselves. So, I've talked to a very close ally and advocate who is currently receiving AISH, who said, I don't think I'm going to be able to go to my GP, who has a relationship with me of 20 plus years, who will be able to say very easily, this individual is on AISH and deserving of AISH by the standards and ADAP, if that's what they want to call it. Instead, they're going to get people to go to doctors they don't know and who, many people are concerned will be influenced um, by sort of I would say, sort of a passive encouragement to be very stringent in their assessments of employability. Now, what's really concerning is, and we've heard this from advocates, is that once you're deemed to be employable, it doesn't matter whether or not you have a job, okay? Whether or not you find a job and you're earning an income, you are employable. Therefore, you don't need that assured income on AISH or ADAP, okay? Um, there's there's no way to overstate how concerning this is. In my opinion, this is going to result in many Albertans being at risk of experiencing homelessness very quickly. And and what really gets me is that Jason Nixon and the UCP government are not willing to meet with advocates. There's a really great moment in our history, I think, really powerful, going back to 2012, ancient history now, where the disabilities community got together and they were very concerned about what was happening in the Department of Human Services and Poverty at the time, or Human Services rather, at the time. Um, and they got together and they all had t-shirts and signs that said, "Nothing about us without us," right? Nothing about us without us. And I was a young advocate at the time, and I remember looking around and thinking, holy shit, I'd never heard this before. But that is very profound and also very basic. We shouldn't be making policy without it being led by the people who it's going to impact the most. And I can't find a single AISH recipient or advocate or caregiver who advocates on behalf of an AISH recipient who says, you know what's a good idea? This ADAP program. It's going to be a complete disaster. And so our goal is to, at PIA and with our partners at, other organizations who have lost their funding because they're advocacy organizations within the disabilities community, is to stop ADAP in its tracks and then advocate for reforms to AISH. I always go by, if it's not broke, don't fix it. AISH is a little bit broke. It's tired, but it can be reformed. What we need to do is increase the threshold for people who can and want to work and are able to find work to work without clawbacks to their basic AISH amount. And then also raise the basic AISH rate to a level where it meets the requirements of the basics in your community, in the part of the province that you live in, so that you can buy groceries, pay your rent, pay for your medicine, transportation, and the basics. Because right now it's fallen behind. So we can reform AISH and make it a program that works for people, and not. And this is the big thing, Nate. And I'll just say this and then stop ranting. But like the big thing is that what they're doing is very obvious and very nefarious, right? What they're doing is they're calling into question um, the um, the integrity of individual Albertans who receive AISH by saying, by implying, I should say, by implying, hey, here's a new program that will, we're just going to make sure that you actually can't work, go through these hoops. And by the way, pay for it yourselves. Might be hundreds of dollars out of pocket to get these forms filled out by your doctor. But we're just asking the question, like, can you really not work? Do you really need to be on an assured income program? Are you sure about that? I mean, to me, it's very clearly, and forgive me for repeating this phrase because it's disgusting, but to me, it's clearly welfare queens from the 90s in the States, right? Um, and it's offensive because we're all Albertans. And you know what? I always love to just like repeat this. This is a line from folks in the disabilities community. And, we heard it at the podcast as well, the taping the other week, is that you might not be disabled now, but one day all of us are going to experience disability. It's just a fact. We all walk around in in these bodies, and one day they're going to slow down, they're going to break down, and something might happen. It might be an accident, it might be an illness, or it might just be aging. But um, this isn't something where, it's something that happens to other people and we don't need to worry about. This affects all of us and we should just care about the most vulnerable. I don't know when that became something that we just don't do in this province. So anyway, that's a rant and a little bit about AISH and ADAP.
No, that's excellent. I mean, I always go back to the line: the measure of any society is how they take care of their weak and their infirm, because it is. And so, if we're just going like, we don't care about the vulnerable, that says far more about us than it does about the vulnerable. Um, a couple things I just want to. So I looked it up while you were
Thank
ranting.
you.
It's the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, and even the language there is to me it betrays itself because we have AISH, which is assured income, so you'll get the money. It's cool, and now we're just we will assist you. Those are two different choices of language that I think are betray the motivations to some degree. But I think the other thing that's really important that you talked about that I just want to sort of highlight is that piece around um, the destabilization that has occurred in this whole process because a lot of people look at Asia and they go, oh, they're getting money for free. What could they possibly have to complain about? Well, the money that they get keeps them below the poverty line.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. So you're taking people that are already dealing with a lot of insecurity by nature of the fact they're disabled. And these are also people who are, the vast majority of them are making ends meet under the poverty line in the province. Um, and you're saying to them, hey, you've already gotten approved for AISH, which is contrary to the narratives that exist out there, not an easy thing to do. If you talk about to anybody who is on AISH about what they have to go through to get on AISH, it's not just like I raised my hand. It's a miserable, arduous process. And
Mhm.
so you're saying to these people like, "Hey, you've proven once already that you need these supports. What if you proved it again, but this time you did it all at your own cost? And how would that be? Like, it's just there's so much about this move that demonstrates what it's really about, and it's not about making sure that people are getting the supports. I mean, we've had disabled folks from and disabled advocates on the program many times before, and the arguments ring true if you don't fund people who need assistance appropriately, they will access emergency pathways for all of the things which inevitably cost more, which inevitably cost the taxpayer more, or you can fund them appropriately and they can actually not access those emergency pathways and contribute to the economy. And so it should by any measure that's not cynical, that's not viewing this from a state of I don't believe you.
Mhm.
It should by any measure be a no-brainer, but
It should be a no-brainer. And it's sort of, it's like, so the process is going to be, not only is AISH leaving people living in poverty, to your point, like $200 to $300 to $500 lower than the poverty line in different communities across the province. But we're going to get everyone to apply to this new program that, as you say, is an assistance program, not assured income, right? So it already tells on itself there. Um, leaving people in even a worse position if they apply and are approved for ADAP. But if they're only partially approved based on the assessment by a doctor that they don't know, saying, oh, you could work 20 hours a week, that will then be clawed off of ADAP, whether or not you have a job. On top of that, the Canada Disability Benefit is not going to go to recipients, right? Like they're already clawing that back. The destabilization, the fear, the indignity of it as well. It's just, it can't be other than, these are folks, including Jason Nixon, who don't seem don't seem to care about the experience of their fellow Albertans at all, right? At all. It's more than disgusting. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm what we're trying to do, and so what people can do just really quickly is if they want, go to Public Interest Alberta, sign up for our newsletter. If you want to become a member, become a member. We're going to be rolling out a campaign in the next 2 weeks saying axe ADAP and fix AISH, very simply. And we'll be talking to people across the province who experience this directly. Because again, we can't do any of this without the people that it impacts the most. They need to be front and center and leading the charge here.
One of the other things, and this sort of segues into the last thing that I really wanted to get into here, is, and again, I think it aligns with the, and thank you for going down that rabbit hole with me there. But one of the things that I think is a recurrent theme of this government is, and it's hard. It's difficult because I try to live by the maxim, never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence. But
Mhm.
there are some days where it's so clearly malicious. Like, and we see this even with their communications. The breakdown recently had a run-in with, and they dragged me into it as well, like on a personal level, which I thought was petty, to say the least. But with a couple of press secretaries from the education ministry, where they decided that they were going to be very clever, air quotes, trademark, I'm being sarcastic, and try to go after the breakdown and go after me, which is a bad look for any government, I think, to go after private citizens and to go after, well, I mean, a public citizen, but like to go after media. Um, that's a bad look. So if you're going to go down that road, you'd better have something. And it was just childish uh, insults. And it was like it was disappointing. It was frankly disappointing for me because I was like, that's what you're going to come with? Like, come on. But I can totally, as you know, I've been operating in this sphere for 6 years now, so I'm used to toxicity from press secretaries. I do miss, I hate to say this, but Matt did engage. He was bad faith, but at least he had like consistency of thought and he didn't advance.
Wolf? Wolf?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of
I
miss him
almost
too.
he did some gross things, but at least he was consistent and clever at times. And we don't get that from this current batch of, as I like to call them, Timu mats. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's sort of like you know that they're looking at the talking points for the issue of the day and putting them on their own personal accounts, and you just almost like you're kind of like, oh, I just almost feel bad for you guys, right?
well,
Like,
if you're going to make yourself part of the story, do so from a place of credibility. And I don't know that a press secretary, as an example, one of the Dimitris Nicolaides press secretary called out the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and was like, "You're lying. We won't see books like 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale get banned by any school boards. This is a blatant lie." And
mhm.
2 weeks later, boy, that aged well. Um, but that's like there's no forethought for what the next move is going to be, and there is a lot of bad faith that happens, and there's a lot of accusations, particularly around the book ban stuff, that have been levied not just by staffers but by the
Mm.
premier and some of the high-ranking uh, uh, hired officials in government. I mean, Daniel Smith has said anybody who wants to show this type of material to kindergarten kids, my God, they're monsters. And I would agree with that if anybody was doing that, but nobody is. So what are we talking about here? But I'm just going to turn it over to you right there.
All right. So I, I don't know if I took my lead from some of the bravery that we've seen exhibited by, yourself or the former CEO of Alberta Health Services. I've never ever responded legally to this kind of thing before, and I think like you, I'm kind of used to it. I'm not out there as much as you are in these spaces, but I use my name and I do put my opinions out there. And I work for an organization that does try to, get into the ring in good faith. So on August 28th, after I and several other people received a draft list from the Edmonton Public School Board, which was complying with the regulation written by the Minister of Education about the criteria for book removal from K to 12 classrooms or K to 12 libraries. I put out a statement on X, okay? And I'll just read it really quickly. I said, here's the list we received today. It includes true masterpieces of literature, humanity, and art. True. School boards must reject the UCP's directive, and it's incumbent on all of us to proclaim the freedom to read. Okay, and this is a list that I quoted, and it shows books like Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, The Handmaid's Tale, Maya Angelou, like Margaret Lawrence, Alice Munro. One of my favorite books when I was a teenager, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which was just an amazing coming of age story that really, really helped me out when I was confused and figuring out what was going on. Um, it's not smut, it's not pornography. It's a really long list of works that are complicated, beautiful, artistic, and include themes that need to be age appropriate. But we're talking about, kids from the age of 5 to 18, like, right? So this list is absolutely ridiculous, but it was drafted in compliance with the ministerial order. Okay, everyone knows this. So then, like, I don't know what it was. Same day, Rob Anderson, who everyone probably knows and loves here in Breakdown Land. He's the Premier's
Oh,
chief of staff. Yeah.
delightful human being, always deals in good faith, never in bad.
Never in bad faith. No. So he tweets back, he quote tweets, and he says, utter nonsense and lies. The GOA directive bans explicit pornographic material from little kids at school. This list is not from the province. And then he goes on to say, it's shocking and disturbing the lengths some adults will go to and the lies they will tell to share pornography with young kids. Gross. And he posts that with a quote tweet of my original post, and it's been seen now over 43,000 times. I mean, it didn't do massive numbers, but it's out there on X. And I had a friend reach out when they saw this, and he's a lawyer, and he said, "Hey, like this is defamatory, and it's malicious, and it's disgusting, right? Like you should consider what you want to do here because it's he shouldn't get away with that." And to me, I paused and I was like, "Geez, you know what? Like it didn't even cross my mind because I'm so used to this level of discourse, which is like." Right down in the muck every single day. It's disgusting. But then he's like, no, listen, like this is defamatory. And also, it's from one of the most powerful people in the province who is stirring up a base who are then making responses like, check this guy's computer. He's obviously a pedophile. Don't leave him alone with kids. Just outrageous, disgusting stuff. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna try to not let him get away with it. So we served him on Labor Day, and we're gonna give him a few days to apologize and post a full apology to his X account. Otherwise, we're gonna escalate. And so, that's news I haven't shared with anybody yet. It's a little bit nerve-wracking, but at the same time, I believe, we cannot let people like Rob Anderson get away with accusing people of this kind of thing because well, for a number of reasons. Number one, it affects people's reputation, right? Like I am a father. I do engage with the community. I am looking forward to being involved in my kids' school this year, like I was last year and the year before. It's outrageous at a personal level, but beyond that, and more importantly, this puts a chill on people, right? This puts a chill on people because nobody wants to have that floating around about them. Um, but this is a guy who gets away with it and has gotten away with it time and time again. He kind of lurks in the shadows, and every once in a while he comes out, he insults somebody, and accuses them of something that's really, really disgusting, and then he goes away. And he's one of the most powerful people in the province. So we'll see what happens. I mean, we're giving him a chance to apologize and retract, and we'll go from there. But again, I think like, I just think about it, it's like I don't want to see anybody in that kind of position or anywhere get away with this kind of stuff. I want to be a part of a conversation in good faith about ideas, and we can disagree, but making these kind of accusations is just, it's not on for me. And I'm not gonna, I'll go all day on this. We're not gonna let it go. And so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
There's so many pieces to that are fascinating to me. I mean, like bang on, he is one of the most powerful people in the province of Alberta. There's certainly no shortage of government staffers and government officials who say that he has a heavy hand in the policies that get written and the political strategy that gets deployed from the premier's office. So he's got a lot of clout at the very least. But the other piece, like he's lying. This is and this is the thing that baffles me. It baffles me because either there, I only see two options for the reaction from the government on the book ban piece, and I'm open to anybody who can coherently, whilst referring to the ministerial order, explain to me what I'm missing because their whole thing is like Danielle Smith. That press conference was just surreal because she was like, "Oh no, we only meant images, but
Mhm.
also yes, we meant books too because 50 Shades of Grey shouldn't be in schools. It's not in schools. I guess the school boards are doing a good job. That's why we needed to make this order." And it's like, what is even
What?
happening here?
And by the way, everyone's going to have to read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand now. Like what? Or should? It's
Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Shrugged
bizarre.
was the one that she
Atlas
wanted,
Shrugged. Thank you.
which also still meets the criteria. Like, there's been no shortage of journalists and
Right.
pundits and academics who have been like, "Would you like to see the passage that disqualifies it?" And like I said on the show on Sunday, if I was to simply say, his hand touched her breast above her shirt, that is, by the ministerial order, explicit sexual content. Um, I mean, I don't think it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. But by the order, that is explicit sexual content. And then Rob Anderson goes online and says, "You're lying. It bans explicit pornographic material from little kids at school." Well, no, it doesn't. And so there's this confusion. They're going back and forth. But if you go to the order as it's written, EPSB was complying with the order, not
100%.
viciously, not to embarrass Premier Danielle Smith or make her look bad, but to follow the order. And now they're coming back and saying, "Oh no, that's not what we meant." Well, then, like you've probably said this a million times too already, and I say it too. It's like, well, then publish a list, right? Like, do your homework.
Well, and that is to me where I cannot ascribe incompetence to this. I'd love to, but I can't because I think it was cowardice. I really do. I think it was they didn't want to be the government that said you can't put Flamer on bookshelves. You can't do that. They didn't want to be the ones that had to wear it. So instead, they thought that they would be clever and farm out the responsibility under explicit and clear direction to the school boards separately. Like that's the other bonkers part to me is like we have like 60 some odd school boards in the province of Alberta, and it wasn't like, "Hey everybody, here's the steps that we'd like you to follow. Here's the books we need you to remove." It was, "Hey everybody, here's explicit guidelines that spell out in devastating detail what needs to be done. And if you could just each go and find your own way through to doing that, please." And so this is why we're seeing like there's social media posts where schools are literally taking their libraries and putting them on their front porch and saying free books. And I wish that I was being hyperbolic, but I've got the social media post to back it up, so I'm not. It is that level of bonkers. Um,
Um, and sorry, I just want to say, Nate, like, yeah, if you think about it, and I'm just sort of like starting to be able to articulate what I think is really happening here. Um, I agree with you. I don't think it's incompetence or a genuine concern about the age appropriateness of literature or images or both being exposed to children. I think it's about controlling young minds and making them into, attempting to make them into compliant Albertans who agree with this ideology, which is in force essentially. It's the dominant ideology, even though I don't agree that it is the major ideology of most Albertans. Um, and they know that public education and education is a way to, in the long term, shape the minds and the thought processes and the hearts of people to be more compliant, you know? And
And cruel.
yeah, and indifferent to the suffering of others, and angry, and self-centered, and easier to mobilize to blame the other, the more vulnerable. Um, it's part of a longer project, and I'm not nearly going to I can't put it as well as Margaret Atwood does, and did just the other day, and in so many of her works, but. Um, to me, this is very deeply ideological and part of a larger project. So, just starting to kind of like, I think we need to start calling that out. And we talked about this too. This is a government that isn't your parents' PC party, obviously. It's not even
No.
Jason Kenney's UCP. This is a deeply, deeply authoritarian, and ideologically driven party that wants to change the very sort of stuff and nature of what it means to be an Albertan and a Canadian. And we're seeing that play out in ways that they don't want to really take credit for or be on the front of with this book ban. They want the school boards to do their dirty work for them, but to the same effect, which is to deprive young Albertans from being able to learn how to think critically and engage with things that happen out in the world and on the internet in literature. It's very, very dark to me. Very dark.
To me, the two pieces that are most fundamental and that should be disqualifying for somebody in Rob Anderson's position, and I say this as a podcast host with all of the authority that comes with that, um, but there's a piece of leadership from the top,
Yeah.
and he is the highest ranking unelected official in government. There's no getting around that. And so when he comes out and he behaves in this way with no expectation of being held accountable by anyone, apparently including the premier, there's an implication that the premier endorses this kind of rhetoric and behavior, and that's terrifying. But the other piece of it to me that's really significant is over and over and over again through their communications and through their policies, the UCP has demonstrated that they're okay with being mean. And
Yeah.
that to me is the most like I go back to the NDP and they made some dumb moves, like the whole outhouses in farmers' fields thing. That was stupid. That was a poorly thought out policy. That was like again, but I don't think that there was malice.
Mhm. I,
Again, I go back to that. If you can ascribe it to incompetence, then do that.
yeah.
And so I can look at that and I can go, well, that was poorly thought out and probably a little bit incompetency. But there was no malice, there was no meanness in it, and the tone and tenor that comes from all of the not all. Let me be fair. There's some people in government who are less mean. But the tone and tenor that comes from a lot of these folks who are choosing to be public facing in their position is mean. It's just mean. And that to me is really alarming because when you have that level of comfort from subordinates like press secretaries and policy advisors of being mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
when you have that, that is something that is endorsed all the way up the chain, and that's something that I think that Albertans should be paying very close attention to. Um,
Do you remember do you remember when the NDP won, and I think it was within a matter of weeks, and there were websites popping up from Ezra Levant saying, fire Dancy, fire Mitchell, fire so and so. And these were chiefs of staff and press secretaries, mostly chiefs of staff, maybe all, in fact, but people who had, maybe had some trouble in the past, sealed court records that then, somehow ended up in the hands of Ezra Levant, or people who, used to work for organizations that, were environmentalist, like Greenpeace. And they came for these people personally. It impacted themselves and their families, and it was really vicious. On the flip side, internally, I worked in that building. And we had meetings, and I remember this, Chief of Staff at the time, Brian Top, who, is a brilliant, brilliant political strategist, um, and someone who, I learned a lot from in terms of how to represent your office and the government that you work for at the time. And he said, when you're on the internet, when you're meeting with stakeholders in the building, when you're out for dinner with your friends or family after work, you are always going to be perceived as representing Rachel Notley and the NDP government. I'll never forget that. And so I just didn't tweet when I worked there
Right?
because because I have thoughts and opinions that Brian, my boss, probably wouldn't have appreciated in the context of working for one of the ministers in Rachel's government. And again, mistakes were made, as Redford would say, in that government. Of course, no government is perfect, no person's perfect, but the shift in, I mean, I would call it, it feels like bullying a lot
Yeah.
of.
Oh, it is. It 100% is. And I mean, I go back to as much as I'm like joking about, I kind of miss Matt. I mean, he did um, his discourse in indirectly or directly, as I choose my words carefully, led to people leaving the province. That's just a statement of fact. Those people said, I left the province because Matt Wolf posted pictures of my kids on the internet. That's just the reality. This and again, I think that one of the things that I struggle with it is there is a lack of respect for the positions that they hold. I say dumb stuff sometimes on the internet or edgy stuff on the internet because I'm an acerbic podcast host. That's what I do. That's the position that I hold. Um, I don't know that the executive director for the premier's office gets to treat his office or his position with the level of disrespect that he's treating it. So good for you, is the moral of the story.
Thank you, sir. We'll see
Um,
what happens.
well, there's got to be some accountability. Like
Hmm.
when people look at, the breakdown posted a picture of Daniel Smith in a blue dress or something. I mean, it's real, so I don't even know what you want from me. But they're doing commentary. How dare the commentary people do commentary? Like, what did you expect was going to happen? What did you think? It's, but I feel like there should be a higher level of the standards should not be the same for somebody like me as they are for the Premier of Alberta or a press secretary for the Minister of the province or the executive director of the province of Alberta. The standards should not be the same. They should at the very least be aspiring to a much higher level. And I will tell you with 100% confidence, the way that I comport myself on this show versus the way that I comport myself in my other job, totally different,
Yep.
because that's what the other job demands of me. And if you lack the basic ability to recognize that, I don't know what you're doing in that role, is all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing, Nate. To me, it's very important for people in these types of roles, like Rob Anderson and like Daniel Smith, to understand that, um, in a sense, this is all theater, but there's no fourth wall, and that what they say and do influences their audience, Albertans, their base. And we hear this all the time, especially for women, and diversity seeking folks, as sometimes we say in the lingo, that it's not a safe space to engage in as a politician, as an advocate, as an activist, when you have people like Rob Anderson saying to you, but in a public theater, um, this guy wants to give out pornography to children.
Yeah.
What does it mean when thousands of people who are supporters of Rob Anderson and Daniel Smith see that and attach it to, someone's name? it's very it's very real. And it can be very, very dangerous. Um, and that's not okay. We have to stop that. And so, yeah, thank you for saying that. But I do think it's incumbent on all of us, and it's really not about me or my reputation, but trying to at least reset a little bit this entitlement to meanness and accusation and bullying that we're seeing just flippantly, right? Like Rob picked up his phone when he saw my tweet about being concerned about book banned books and thought, oh, no big deal. I'll just make this accusation. That, like it's got to stop.
Well, and again, I go back to if it was Rob Anderson who briefly had his little, he had a podcast for a little bit too. He had to pay a lot of money to get people to view it. I saw the ad ratings. But if it was Rob Anderson, the podcaster, saying something like that, it would still be offensive. It would still almost certainly be illegal. But it would be a shade less alarming
Yeah.
because it's a podcaster being a podcaster. What are you going to do? Um, it is not Rob Anderson, the podcaster. It is not Rob Anderson, the private citizen. It is Rob Anderson, the executive director to the premier of Alberta. And that to me is the truly egregious piece to it because he is doing that with the knowledge that he has. Like, I haven't seen Danielle Smith say, "Oh, that's a bridge too far. I don't support that." I haven't seen it deleted because Danielle Smith said, "Rob, you can't do stuff like that. That's not okay." I believe the tweet still remains up. And
It is.
so it remains up with the endorsement of the premier of Alberta, period, end of sentence. And that's the piece that people, I think, need to get. And that's my high horse. I want to end on that note, though, because it's miserable. Uh,
Yeah.
Here's where I want to end
Okay.
because you've been very generous with your time. Um, One of the things that happened, and I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but I'm going to bring it up again. One of the things that happened at the live show during the Q&A is there was a person from rural Alberta who said, um, "Hey, this is tonight's been great," and this was like, I was. I had the feels a little bit when this stuff was going on in the Q&A. I mean, there were parts of the Q&A that were hard because
Yeah.
there are people who communicate differently than what a lot of people are used to is how I'm going to phrase that. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be given the space to communicate, which is why I allowed the whole thing to unfold the way that it did. For those of you who are there, you know what I'm talking about. But the one of the things that really I was like, I was not expecting that was the people who talked about the sense of community that they got from being at the Breakdowns live show, which is such a bonkers thing to say. Um, and this person was talking about, hey, like I love this sense of community. I love knowing that I'm not alone. How can we build on this? And you stepped up and you said, well, hey, send me an email because this is what Public Interest Alberta exists to do. Um, so for people who are looking for that community, for people who are looking for building those networks, for people who are looking for identifying the supports and getting the training on how to push back against this dumpster fire, um, where do they contact? What are the appropriate routes to contact? Because I don't want people like blowing up your inbox. But how do people get in touch with you? How appropriately? How do people get in touch with Public Interest Alberta? What is the process? Go.
Yeah. So if people want to be in touch, I think first and foremost, I'd just say, please don't hesitate. If you put your hand up or you reach out to say, hey, I'd like to talk about something that I want to advocate for or change in my community, we'll be there. That was a great moment. And I got the feels too because it felt like a real organic organizing moment. And people are like, okay, this is great to listen to Brad rant, kind of. But here's what's happening in my real life, in my community, and how can we address it? So that was brilliant. So you can reach out to us at pialberta.org. That's our website. My email address, and it's my work email, so blow up my inbox as much as you want, is brad.lefortune at pialberta.org. And I always say, if you can get a small handful of people together, even if it's by Zoom, if it's in person, even better, I will come to you and we will talk about setting up a chapter, having a community meeting, having a town hall about the CPP and the boneheaded Alberta pension plan proposal, whatever you want to organize on, as long as it's focused on the public interest, which is focusing on public services and institutions and spaces, we will be there because we don't want people to feel alone anymore. And you don't have to be because you're not, right? So reach out to us. We'll be there in person and we'll make some good things happen. And we'll piss off Rob Anderson and the UCP press secretaries in the process. And it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, that's the big thing, Nate, is that like this is really fun. And I'm not just saying that because it's like, oh yeah, you can have a knitting circle and it's pretty great. Although knitting circles are great. It is actually fun to get together and think, okay, you know what? There's 10 of us with a lot of experience and a big problem on our hands. And let's figure out how we're going to stop this coal mine from, being opened back up in the Old Man River watershed. And the next thing you know, like there were hundreds of people at that town hall in Fort Macleod a couple of months ago, and it was incredible organizing. And those folks have been doing amazing work for a couple of years now. And you talk to them, and they're like, well, nobody else was doing it, so we just got started. And getting a little bit outside of your comfort zone, as long as you have the support of people around you, actually kind of feels exciting and good when you're supported by good community. So reach out to us. It's not easy to get a hold of us. I will respond to you almost in real time because this is the stuff that really gets me excited is getting out there, especially outside of, Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge, where we have more of a presence and more of a baseline there. Um, we'd love to organize with you. So yeah, just please be in touch.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say? Anything else you want people to hear? I'll give you a free open mic for a couple minutes at the very,
Mm.
very end.
Oh
Um,
man.
all yours.
Okay, well, Nate, first of all, keep doing what you're doing. Love ya. Don't mean to like, make it awkward or whatever, but I think it's important for us, like as people who put ourselves out there to hear from others sometimes, like you're doing amazing work. Thank you. Keep that up. We need your voice now more than ever. I will also say that um, every single teacher in the province, so many of us have your backs. What I've seen when it comes to the discourse online, and just out there in the world is that, oh man, I love it. It's so great. The finance minister and the education minister have totally missed the mark on the public sentiment right now. That's my sense. And teachers have the support of the public in a way that even surprises me a little bit as someone who is just through and through all for public services and believes in worker power. The feedback that we're getting from PIA is like, what can we do to support teachers and show our support right now? So, solidarity with the teachers. You're doing amazing work. We're with you. And yeah, like going back to the beginning of what we were talking about, Nate, something is shifting. And I know people say that all the time. When you're trying to write the perfect like fundraising email, there's something in the air and we just need a little bit more support. But truly, 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 when I see what people are talking about, even just like overhearing at the coffee shop or you're in the cab or the Uber, right? What people are talking about is education. They're talking about healthcare and they're talking about democracy in a way that I don't get a lot other than at my boardroom table with my board. It's a bunch of other, people who really, really care about this stuff and have for a long time. It's something in the air, and I'm very excited about that because we need it, right? We need it. This is not, none of this is normal. People should not get used to this or become desensitized to what is happening because of Daniel Smith's particular brand of, um, right-wing authoritarianism with like libertarian rhetoric, whatever it is. It's very, very dangerous. And now more than ever, we need people to stand up and get involved. That can be big, that can be small, that can be loud, it can be quiet, but just keep doing what you're doing because, we've got this. We're going to bring this government down, whether Rob Anderson likes it or not. We just have to keep doing what we're doing. So, thank you so much for having me on today, Nate. I loved it. I know I get a little bit ranty, so thank you for keeping me on track. And yeah, we'll see you out there for sure.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. I really appreciate it.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case, maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdowns audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.